Hello friends, today I'm going to solve LeetCode problem number 382, linked list random node. So in this problem, we need to implement the solution class. The solution class has two functions. The first function is solution linked node height, and the next function is get random function. So basically this is a constructor function, and this is a function where we are going to get a random node from the linked list. So in the constructor function, in the solution function here, we are going to initialize our linked list object. So we will be given the head argument, and we need to initialize the linked list object, and then from get random we need to get a random node from the list, and the possibility or probability of getting any random node should be equal. So let's see how we could solve this problem. Basically here what we are given is, in the solution function we need to create initialize the object. So what are we going to do is, we are just going to create a head of the linked list and store the value of the head in our linked list head. And also in the get random function, since we need a random value within the linked list, so how can we actually achieve a random value? Let's suppose if this were an array. So let's suppose if these were an array, so what would we have is 1, 2 and 3 in an array, right? So for the array we also know the length of the array, so we can just get the length of the array by, if this is an array A, we could just get the length by A, that length that would give us the length of the array, right? Suppose L is the length of this array, then we can get the random value from this array by multiplying this length with a random number which is in the range 0 to 1. So how is that possible? How is it possible that this gives us a random number? So since this value is a random number and this is a fixed number, right? So if we multiply any value with a random number, we are going to get a random value. So that's why we are going to use this formula for that. Let's just take this as an example. Since the length is equals to 3, and let's choose a random number between 0 and 1. Let's choose a value 0.2. So what would this return us? That would return us 1.5, right? So do we have a node 1.5? Well, of course not. We do not have a node 1.5. We are actually going to take the floor value of this. So that would mean we are taking the node at index 1. So this is 0, so this is 1, so that's, we are taking this value. Now let's suppose we get a random number of 0.7. so in this case, what's the value? 7 times 3 is 21, right? So we get 2.1, and since we are taking the floor value, we take the node at index 2, so we take this node value, and suppose we get a random number 0.5, that in that case we would get, okay, so I did this calculation wrong here. This would be 0.6, which would be the node at index 0, and in this case this would be 1.5, and that would be node at index 1. So we are actually getting all the random values, right? And all of these are in the range 0 to 2. So in this way we can actually obtain a random node from an array. But in case of linked list, we do not know the length of the linked list, right? So what are we going to do is, we are first of all going to determine the length of the linked list when we are actually initializing the object. So in the solution function we will also determine the length of the linked list. So now let's do that. So let the length initially be 0, and then we loop over a while loop. While we have the height, the length will keep on increasing, and then we move to the next head every single time. So this will give us the length of our linked list and the height. So basically now we will take this length and find the random index for our random get random function. So what are we going to do is let a random value be equals to method floor. So we are taking the floor value and we are using the random function from our JavaScript library to generate a random number and then multiply that with the length of our linked list. So this will now give us a random value. We are taking the floor value of that random number, and then what are we going to do is we are going to find the node at that index. So while height, okay, not height, while rand value minus minus, so we are looping over. Okay, so we also need the head. Oops, I'm sorry. So we have our head, and now from the beginning we are now going to iterate until and unless we reach that node. So head equals to head that next, and then finally we are going to return our head. Let's try to run our code and see if it works. Okay, so I have oh, actually we need to return the value of the head. All right, since it's been accepted, let's submit it. Awesome. So the time complexity to solve this problem would be, since we are iterating over each of the node in the linked list, this would be an O of n time complexity, and in this function as well, since we are iterating over each of the head, this would also be an O of n time complexity, and the space complexity is constant for both of the functions. We could also solve this problem in a constant in O of n space complexity and O of 1 time complexity for get random. I mean O of 1 time complexity for the solution function and O of n time complexity for this one. So how could you solve this in O of 1 time complexity? Let me know in the comments below.